to What's the Difference? Stories about lives changed because you made a difference. Brought to you by the Mount Church. Here's your host, Pastor Andrew Segree.
Hey, welcome to the 7th episode of What's the Difference? We created this series because we believe, even in a year like last year, and even in this year, 2021, that Jesus is still making a difference in people's lives. So with each and every episode, we're going to sit down with everyday people just like you, just like me, and we're going to ask the question, what's the difference? What has Jesus been doing in you and through you? And so with each and every episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode when it's released. So for this 7th episode of What's the Difference, I am so excited and so honored to have the one and only Susan Wanderer on this episode.
Andrew, I'm so excited. I can't even stand it. I really am.
Yeah, it's so good to have you.
You're like a pro at this, man.
Well, I mean, other than these beautiful microphones, I don't know about it, how professional this is, but
you are. It's super fun.
It's so good to have you. And why don't we just take a moment, Susan, and for everyone listening, and most people watching this go to our church, but just take a moment to introduce yourself and what is your role here at the Mount?
Yep. I'm Susan Wanderer. Tell me, I'm looking at you. Can I look at you?
You can look wherever you want.
I'm gonna look at you. All right. So I'm the minister to families here, and I've been here this June will be 15 years.
Oh, wow.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's a good kind of insane.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
And, I love the story that Jesus has been writing with your life. And, I know where you are now, right?
Yeah.
But I think it would be so good to hear where you've been.
Okay.
So why don't you just take a moment and just share your story, share where you're from originally,
okay.
Maybe how you were raised,
yeah.
And then when did you first know that Jesus was pursuing your heart?
Yeah. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I personally think it was just the best hometown ever to grow up in.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much to this day.
Are you a UVA fan?
Yes, I'm a huge UVA fan. Huge UVA fan. And so, I grew up there. My dad is a third-generation apple farmer. My mom is a retired preschool teacher. She taught elementary and then preschool, and she did that for 40 years. And I would say the whole way that I knew Jesus was after my heart and captured my heart is because my parents were no nonsense about our relationship with the church.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an incredible relationship within our community and our neighbors, and we had beautiful friends outside the church, but really our best, most beautiful connections were within the church for me. My best friends were in the church, and my parents were huge in the whole thought of widening the circle around me of helping other people point me to Christ.
Yeah.
And so I'm a local church gal. I know that it's got its beautiful and ugly and hard parts about it, but forever I will believe that the local church truly is God's gift to this world.
Yeah.
And it helped point me to know Jesus better simply because of the faithful people that were inside that church. So
yeah, that's good. And then when did you make that? We call it different things like stepping over into faith, making Jesus the Lord of your life. What was that moment for you? When did that happen?
I was 9, and I talked to my mom and my dad. And back then I grew up a Southern Baptist girl, and so back then when I went to my parents and I told them I love Jesus and I wanted Jesus to be in control of everything. And so we went and talked to our pastor, and once you pray with your pastor and you walk through what salvation is and you get to see what Jesus did for you, then that next week I got to go before the whole church. Some people back in the day called it walking the aisle.
Sure.
But the next week I went down front, and the most beautiful part about that was that just seeing as a 9-year-old the church celebrate with you your decision. Kind of like what we do now with baptism services.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where people are celebrating what Jesus is doing in your life. And I was 9 years old, and my pastor and my parents led me that way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So you're 9 years old, Charlottesville, Virginia,
Yes.
growing up there. And then eventually you start to even feel, not that you're a child of God following Jesus, but you start to feel like there's even a calling on your life to pursue ministry and to be in ministry. What did that look like, and when did that begin? That like Jesus was saying, okay, you're my child, but now you need to step into ministry too.
I knew it was in high school. I didn't know what it looked like though, because I just couldn't figure it out. I'll come up with ideas, but I don't always have the great details to get me to an idea. But I can see something, and I knew I just wanted to serve Him my whole life. Like that's what I knew I wanted to do. I didn't know how it would look, and that's what I wanted. And I became a social worker. And in social work, I thought this is how I will serve God, and I loved social work. Then I found out, because I am not so smart in looking at contract details, I did not realize my first job as a social worker was only a 10-month job, and it went with the school year.
Not even a full 12 months they gave you?
No, it was only a 10-month job because it was with Head Start, so it was a preschool. And I had 40 case families. To this day, one of my most favorite jobs of my life. I got to work with these 40 families, but all of a sudden, I had people saying, hey, what are you going to do for the summer? And I'm like, I'm going to work. And they went, we don't work in the summer. And I went, we don't get a paycheck? They were like, no. I was like, dude, I got to figure something out.
There you go.
So I was like, this is crazy. So I found this job in Atlanta that was working in a kids ministry, in children's ministry, because I knew God was also calling me into that direction of kids ministry. So I went and I learned everything I could with kids ministry that summer. Well, at the end of that summer, my mentor, who is still my mentor to this day, I love her, Susan Blunt, she and her husband moved to Nashville. And so she had been the children's pastor there, and she recommended to the personnel committee that I just stay and do that job. And so I did. And that's kind of how I jumped out headfirst into full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Was in 1996. And I was living in Atlanta during the Olympics.
Wow.
I know.
That's
Super
awesome.
Fun. It was.
Yeah. I didn't have this question down, but I actually forgot that you were a social worker.
Yeah.
Like was it just 10 months? Like you were a social worker, or
10
was it,
months.
did you go
No.
back at any point?
No, because at the end of 10 months, I knew that I was supposed to stay at that church in Atlanta after Susan came to me and said, hey, I told the personnel committee that you're the person and you need to stay on. And so I stayed on. And I don't regret one bit of it, but I do know those 10 months of social work, some of my absolute favorite. I love those families so much. They were so precious. The thing I loved is that so many of these families, none of this was on our questions, but I'm going to tell you this because this is what I love, because it shows the local church in action.
Yeah.
I had so many families that had so many needs, and the governmental agencies were just up to here in being able to help because there was no funding, any of that kind of stuff. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting there at night going, Lord, I got 40 families. How am I going to take care of them? All of these doors are closing. And all of a sudden, I went, there are like 50 Sunday school classes sitting in your church. So I went one by one to different classes in my church and was like, can you adopt one of my families? Can you adopt one of my families?
That's so good.
And so I had like, for instance, I had one family that had no running water, the only dirt floors, all of this stuff. This whole Sunday school class came. They rebuilt their floors. They gave them plumbing. They did everything. And so I get into work the next day after the weekend that they did. All I did do was bring food, because that's what you do for Christians. Apparently, show up with food, and they'll do the work.
Yep. Meal
and so
train.
they did all the work in this back rural neighborhood. And my boss was like, what government agency got all that done? I went, the church.
That's right.
Like the church did it. And those people showed up, and it was so great. But yeah, so I loved being that. I love being a social worker.
That's so good. And it's always interesting how God begins to weave a story together.
Yeah.
A job that you stepped into that you thought was going to be probably for a while. It was only 10 months.
Oh, yeah,
And then
right?
you got redirected
Yes.
to go start working at this church and become the children's minister, family pastor there. And now, at what point did you get connected with the Mount? Okay, how long have you been here now? Is it like 40 years?
Yeah, it
50?
feels like it.
50 years?
Ministry years is intense.
Yeah.
So,
we tell people it's like dog years when you work in
is.
ministry. Just multiply it times 7.
He's not wrong.
So.
And so I served in Atlanta for a little bit, went back to my home church. There, I was able to work and go to seminary. So they helped me with my seminary experience there. Then I served for 5 years at a church in Hampton Roads, Virginia, called Liberty Baptist Church. And then 1 year I served in Florida at a church. While I was there, my mom was having some back issues, and she was in a wheelchair and all of these different things. And my father never asked anything hardly of me. So I knew when he would ask something that I needed to have my ears perked up. And he said, it's time for you to come home. And I was like, or what? I just got here for a year. And he said, we got to figure this thing out with your mom. I was like, okay. Well, at the time, Ed Wander and I had met.
Yeah.
And Ed was in Springfield, Virginia. So I was like, sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
I will head home.
Now, how did you and Ed first meet?
We met online.
Okay.
Back in the day before you didn't talk about it being online.
Sure.
Because it could be an axe murderer.
Christian Mingle, eHarmony,
No.
Tinder.
It was Christian something. Christian Cafe, Christian
Cafe.
Christian Tinder. They don't have that. but
Swipe the cross.
I know.
What you do with that one.
And so we met, and then I was interviewing between here and another church in Reston, and very long story short, I ended up here, and it has been so great. 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah, in June it will be 15 years.
All right, so 15 years you've been here at the Mount, and it is obvious that you're passionate about kids.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things I love about you is that every time even just any kid comes across your path, it's almost like they have the most passionate cheerleader in their corner when they come across you. You make them feel like they're the most special kid in the world. Why don't you just take a moment to share your heart, your vision for family ministry, kids and parents? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. I believe without a doubt that every kid needs to know that they are a very important person with a very important purpose. And as a matter of fact, when guests come into kids ministry on any of our campuses, they have a sticker that our amazing welcome team puts on that says VIP.
Yep.
And we say to them, you are a very important person with a very important purpose, because we believe kids need to know God has created them on purpose for a purpose.
That's right.
And that purpose is kingdom work. Whether they are in the marketplace, whether they are lawyers or cashiers or whatever they're going to be in life, that God has a purpose for them that is eternal in building the kingdom. And our hope and desire is that we partner with families to be able to do that, and that we are able to create systems where these families do not feel defeated in leading their kids to Christ, but they feel like they are the hero in doing so.
Yeah.
And so we have an incredible kids team that does this, and we have Jason and his team for student ministry that does this, and kids are starting to really see what their purposes are. And that's exciting. That's exciting to be able to know also that moms and dads and caregivers are able to be able to point their kids to Christ without it being overwhelming. Because I think for a long time, the global church, in an effort to create sound doctrine, made it a little scary for parents to feel like they could lead their own kids to Christ. And so our motto is that what happens at home is more important than what happens in the church.
That's good.
And if we can say what you're doing at home every single day, the way you're behaving, the way you're pointing, the way you're playing, everything that you're doing, in somehow showing them who Jesus is, that's more important than what's happening here. And we believe that's radically important what's happening here.
Yeah.
That should show them that we believe even more so in what they're doing at home.
Absolutely. That's so good, because one thing that I saw last year in 2020 during the pandemic, when church was online only.
Yeah.
And we were at home with the kids, especially on Sunday mornings.
That's right.
One of the things that I saw was a hole, even within our own family, is that some of that personal discipleship, even me as a pastor who tells parents all the time, look, we're coming alongside of you.
Yeah.
You're the primary person responsible. Like, I realized, like, I had to even begin to put too much burden on the church to disciple our kids. Because I remember thinking, man, what's wrong with these kids on Sunday mornings being home? But just realizing, look, I at the end of the day, like, I have to own it. And I love the fact that one of the visions for the ministry is to empower parents to really help their kids own their faith.
That's
so
right.
that is so good.
Yeah.
I know not only are you, passionate about kids, but also I know that as you've been trying to help kids and parents, your journey into parenthood and having kids of your own was, it's a beautiful one, but I know it was a challenging one.
Sure.
I know God led you and Ed to adopt, and that's one of the parts. And there's so many parts of your story we could talk about, but I love your journey into adoption.
Yeah.
And I want you to share a little bit about what you experienced as God kind of led you there.
Sure.
And then even just going through the process. What was that like?
So Ed and I were a little bit older in getting married. I mean, we weren't like ancient, but I mean,
I
was
won't
33.
ask you how old you are.
Well, I was 33.
You're
and Ed
going to
was
say
31.
it. Okay,
I know.
that's good. How old are you now?
I'm Actually, I'm 47. I will say it. But
that's
Ed,
not bad.
I know. Ed is 33. I mean, I was 33 and Ed was 31 when we got married. And so I knew from a very young age that it was most likely that I would not be able to have kids. So starting at 17, we realized that was not going to be the issue because I've had 5 surgeries. We just knew not probably going to be a possibility.
Yeah.
And Ed and I talked about that early on, that adoption would definitely be in our future. But did we want to see if bio kids were maybe in the cards? So we did that whole thing. What we decided was, because we were older when we got married, that we needed to go ahead and decide, are we going to do bios now or are we not going to do that? So we went to a infertility clinic up in Northern Virginia, and it was, after several different things that they went through, a couple of miscarriages. Finally, after the second miscarriage, I was laying on the couch, and Ed just looks up at me and he went, I'm done with this. I'm done watching you hurt. I'm done with this. And so why are we waiting on this? And I went, I don't even know. And he said, then let's just get moving. Like, let's stop this nonsense. So we canceled all of our other appointments with the clinic, and Ed's a big researcher. So he researched every single country that we could research, including domestic and international. And we knew very strongly that God was leading us to Ethiopia. And as you know, it's a long process. And I will say, as my husband says, while I may be the big dreamer in our family, Ed is the one that is the fulfiller of those dreams, because he is detail-minded.
Sure.
And so I've got pictures of him like on the living room floor with just mounds of paperwork for 3 kids, trying to get them home. And I'll say, I know a lot of people that walk the adoption road if fertility is your issue. A lot of those women do not realize they have infertility problems until they get married. I want to say, this sounds very strange, I had the luxury of knowing it at 17. So God had already prepared my heart. Like, I didn't have this deep sadness in me. There was no deep sadness. It was, let's get on with the game of what God's plan is.
Yeah.
I recognize that's not every woman's story.
Yeah.
But then,
I'm sure there's probably other people who are listening right now, who maybe are battling infertility, and walking through that yourself, and with Jesus leading you. I mean, what is something that maybe you could even say to maybe encourage somebody who has been going through that even right now?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Joshua was home for 7 years before he went off to college, and this is when, it took 7 years for God to really show me this incredible moment, but we dropped him off at Liberty University, your alma mater, and we drove from Liberty to Charlottesville, and I wanted to be the driver. I had to have some kind of control of something. So I was like, everybody get in your cars and be quiet. In your seats. So I'm driving, and I literally cried from from Liberty to Charlottesville. As we got closer to Charlottesville, there's a few times in your life that beyond a doubt that God is speaking to you. I knew he was talking to me, because he said, I just want you to think, had you had the ability to have kids, you would not have the blessing of today. You would not know what it is like to watch your kids succeed like this. Yeah. You would not know Joshua in his gifting, sitting there in new opportunity. You would not know any of this. And in that moment, I just turned and looked at my family, and I went to my girls, I am so glad that God chose to see fit that I did not have children, because I got to watch these 3 amazing humans succeed. And I get to watch these 3 amazing humans have a purpose that is so far beyond anything I could imagine. Yeah. And I'm not saying biological kids couldn't have done that, but for our story, in that moment, I was so grateful for my infertility, because I got to see my boy, and I got to see him do great things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
that's good.
It's just, they are the light of our lives. They are the best thing that has ever happened to us. And I cannot imagine one single solitary day without them. And ever since dropping him off at school, it's just taken this whole turn of, I get to be their mom. And I get to be able to hear them call me mom. And I get to be the one that comforts them at night. And I get to be the one that takes care of them. And I would not have known that joy and I also get to be a multiracial family. We get to know that joy. And there's so many layers to it that I'm just so grateful that even at 17 years old, when I realized I'm probably not going to be able to have kids, that God had a greater plan.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's so good. And I want to also back up into the adoption story.
Yeah.
Because, so here's, Ed sprawled out across the floor
Yeah,
with all this
yeah.
paperwork. How long
Yeah.
did the journey take?
Yeah.
And then why Ethiopia? I mean, out
Okay.
of all the countries in the world to adopt from, why was it Ethiopia?
Okay. So the whole journey took about 2 years. And then from paperwork to home. And actually, 10 years ago today was our first trip to Ethiopia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they popped up in my memories this morning on my Facebook. And so we had to do 2 trips there. And so this was our first one today. The reason we chose Ethiopia is every single country has different guidelines. We knew immediately some countries we just did not feel called to. But some countries have got severe regulations. Like one of the countries, you have to be married 10 years. Well, we had only been married like 5. And so different things like that. And then other kind of things. I mean, there was just weird stipulations on some of the countries. Ethiopia, we had been drawn to. And after Ed did all of the research, I came home one day, he came home one day, and we both looked at each other and said, it's Ethiopia. And so we called our adoption agency, America World, and we started down that path. And we've really, their adoption has changed in the way that it looks in Ethiopia. Right now, they're mainly focusing on domestic adoption. They've closed down international adoption. But they are just, they're the kindest people we've ever met. They're just very kind. And I mean, that's not the reason we chose Ethiopia. We really chose it just because we felt like that's where God was pointing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know even because we adopted a child from India. And even just going through the process, it's funny how God even kind of, because of different restrictions that different countries have, and even depending on the adoption agency you work with, how some of those things are kind of just filtered down through the process of elimination. Because even how we landed on India was simply because some countries won't let you adopt a child if you already have children.
That's
we had 3 already, whereas India's like, it's fine, come on, as well. So what was the, as you guys were on that 2-year journey, to go through the adoption process, what was the hardest part, and then where did you see God working in that journey?
I think the hardest part was the waiting, because I'm a very impatient person. I mean, you think about it, most families, they wait 9 months.
Sure.
And then they have a child. This whole 2 year
And there's a whole lot less paperwork,
it's
too.
It's a whole lot less paperwork. And that was another thing. You would hit a roadblock. Like we hit a roadblock and had to go to Richmond one day to get this weird document, authorized. Then we had to go to D.C. to go to immigration. And then, there's every day there was a new phone call telling us, oh, nope, they've changed their mind. This is the kind of document they want. Nope, they've changed their mind. This is what they want. And so all of that, you think, oh, it's just paperwork. It's a lot of, even to this day, and I'm sure it is with CARES too, we still have to do paperwork. Every year on the anniversary of the adoption, not Joshua anymore because he's after 18, but for the girls, until they're 18, you have to provide this book, it feels like, of stuff. And so the paperwork is worth it. It's just a lot. Yeah. So, it didn't make us want to quit ever. There was never a time that made us want to quit. But definitely, it's just an interesting journey. It's but it's well worth it.
Absolutely.
It's just, you need to make sure you have the right people navigating you through it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And so you bring these 3 kids home.
Yes.
Which, were you intending to do a sibling group of people?
Yeah.
Or were you just hoping for one child?
Well,
or?
we were going to adopt one baby named Ruby. And Ed was like, we're not naming a kid Ruby. But I was. And so we were going to do one child. And then when we saw how long it was taking, Ed and I were like, maybe we should just go ahead and just do 2 now instead of having to redo this whole process. Yeah. Well, then we had heard through the grapevine about the sibling group of 3. And it's a very, very long story in that, but we called the adoption agency and they said it is highly unlikely those kids will ever be paper ready. They will probably just be in the system forever. It is rare that they will be paper ready. So you need to just chill on that. That's not going to happen. But I just knew, like, I was like, something is gonna happen. And then in January, we got the phone call and they said they're paper ready. We don't know how it happened, but they're paper ready. And so Joshua could speak a little bit of English, a lot. I mean, he was very good. The girls, none. And so that was interesting, kind of blending two cultures into one. For that first little bit. So they all were able to learn English, or Josh already had a lot of it, but the girls by Christmas. Yeah. So it took about 6 months. So, which was interesting as well too.
Yeah.
So.
And so you bring these 3 kids home.
Yep.
And you've already mentioned it, like you're now a multiracial family.
Yes.
Multicultural family. And maybe in the beginning a multilingual family.
Yes.
As well. And you're from Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yes.
And you're certainly on the lighter shade of the skin tone.
Very white.
And then you adopt
whiter.
and then you adopt 3 kids
Yes.
from Ethiopia.
Yes.
What was it like, in essence, bringing those 2 worlds together?
Yeah.
And then were there any challenges? And then what did God show you
Sure.
in all of that?
Yeah. It was, first of all, it's just, it's the beauty of what I believe the kingdom of heaven will look like when you've got 2 cultures that collide and to make one family. And, there were moments where I remember the first time I took them to Target, and I was standing in front of what they had, a big sign that said ethnic hair care. And I am just standing there knowing I have a list of things that I thought I had gotten off the internet of what I needed to take care of my children's hair. And I'm just standing there like, they all 3 have different hair types. What am I going to do? And I saw this other lady, this beautiful, beautiful African-American lady standing there. And I walked over and I went, can you just help me? And she walks over and she went, absolutely, I can. She felt all of their hair. She handed me all the product that I needed. And
this was pre-COVID too, right?
It was pre-COVID, no masks.
Okay.
And so she was touching their hair, she was feeling it, and she handed it to me. And she looked at me and said, you are going to be a good mom to them.
Oh, so
and
good.
I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt God had sent her to me, because I felt like I'm sitting here with 3 different hair types. I'm sitting here with kids that don't speak English. I love them more than life itself, but I don't know what I'm doing. And this woman just helped me in that moment, which was good. And I learned different things, like we had to have some hard conversations with Joshua, and that were how I didn't expect to have those conversations, especially with a white child. So things like when we would walk into the Target, I would have to have him walk beside me sometimes, because I would see the security guards walking up a little bit, because Josh would be walking in with like a hood on. And so I would have to walk up to him and say, all right, buddy, let me explain this. And the thing is, culturally in Ethiopia, the men have these things called yabis, and they wrap their heads to keep them warm, and they wear them.
Sure.
So it was similar to a sweatshirt hoodie. So he didn't understand why he couldn't wear his hoodie. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is this? So I was explaining, buddy, here's what I need you to know. And like, he would love to go running because he was on the cross country team. So I would say, bud, when you do go running, let's still go running during the day. And I need you not to wear that hoodie. And he's like, well, explain to me why, Mom. And to have a conversation with a 14-year-old child, well, I mean, he was a child, even though he was a teenager, and explain why you can't wear that hoodie, it was sobering for me, as it should be, to be able to say, I don't know that I would have ever had to have that conversation with a white son. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those kind of things were eye-opening for me as a white parent, as they should have been eye-opening way before. But my own children coming into my home, it created much more awareness than what I had had before as a parent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then do you feel like in the middle of all that, like even now, I mean, because Joshua's in college, and then Ruth is in high school, and then Dib is in middle school. Yeah. What is something maybe God's teaching you right now, within your family as well?
I tell you what, really, what God has shown me in the last year is that presence is everything. Because 2020 has been it was difficult for everyone, very, very difficult for everyone. But for our family, what I am realizing is that being present really is everything. Because Ruth, I still envision her at 6 years old. Because when they came home, they were 3, 6, and 14. And I think now Ruth really only has 3 more years with us. That's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And to think that Dib is now in 6th grade, quickly heading to be a senior. You know what I mean? Like it's going fast. And then Joshua will graduate next year and go off to make his films. And I'm just thinking, where did the time go? And that really what God is showing me with our family is that presence is everything.
Yeah.
And that is the most we can be present, whether it is physical presence or with Joshua, whether it is daily text messages that may get on his nerves because I'm his mom, that I want to be present in everything. Because I believe that's one thing, and I know this is one of your questions coming up. That's one thing God did teach me, is that God really is an ever-present help. And if we can model that and be ever-present with our kids, then they will always know they can come to us for help.
That's good.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that perfectly leads me into my last
know,
question,
right?
okay? It is obvious, again, like you have a passion for people.
Yeah.
And you're certainly a gifted leader. In fact, you serve on the lead team here at our church, and you're technically my boss as well. So if you want to cut this thing off at any point, you absolutely can.
It's silly.
But you are married to one of the kindest men I've ever met.
Yeah.
You're raising these 3 kids, college, high school, middle school. You're taking care of your parents as they step into their more golden years. Is that what you call it? Is it golden years
so. That
as you
sounds good.
progress in life? You're taking care of your parents. You lead this family ministry team. It's several staff people, several hundred kids that come each week to all the different campuses. You have a podcast called She Speaks Stories, which you guys need to check that out if you haven't yet. You just started a virtual walking club called Wander On as well. And all of this, and some of this even happened last year during the pandemic, but in all of these things that you've been involved in, especially with last year,
Yeah.
which one of these things maybe caused you to dive deeper into your relationship with Jesus last year?
Well, I'll say 2020 was hard for everyone. And then 2021 showed up like its bratty little sister, and it's still going strong. And so I think with us, with 2020, we experienced something as a family that was, I think a lot of families were experiencing during COVID. So we know that depression and mental health issues, suicide, everything is on the rise during COVID.
Yeah.
And there's not enough help out there really to be able to provide across the board for so many people. So for 10 months of 2020, my husband and I walked this journey where Ed suffered from a very deep depression. We're actually going to record our story. We're going to air it in May on the She Speaks Stories, which is the sweetest little community of women and men that you'll ever know. But we're going to, because May is Mental Health Month, we're going to air it then. But so I'm going to give you the brief. What happened is Ed was in this pretty deep depression, and it forced us to put together a plan, a very big plan, because depression does not just affect one person. It affects the entire family.
Yep.
And so we had to act quickly on this. And so we did several things. We put together this plan that is like a 5-fold plan. And one is that depression will lead you down a road you never wanted to go. It leads you into very dark places, very sad places. So if you're not proactive in the help of depression, it can escalate very, very quickly. And so several things that we saw is that we learned in 2020 that when God says that he is an ever-present help in times of trouble, that he is sincerely an ever-present help. In our bedroom, we put all over one of our walls all of these scriptures about God's faithfulness, God's healing, God's ability and promises. And when there were days where Ed really could not pray or read or do anything except just be, he would just sit on the edge of our bed and just read those scriptures. Yeah. We learned deeper about what prayer is. We learned deeper about what God intends for us to talk to him about, and that you can literally bring to him the good, the bad, the ugly, and the lovely of every single portion of all of your dark thoughts. He will take them. We learned that counseling is a good thing.
Yes, it
is. We
is.
learned that therapy is a good thing. We learned that medication is a good thing. And with those 5 things of scripture having the ability to change a life, with prayer and counseling and therapy and medication, My husband came out on the other side of it. Our kids walked that entire road with us, and I was scared. Like, how is this going to upset them watching their dad having this experience? If anything, it has brought them more compassion, more humanity, and understanding what mental health is. Because like we told them, you would never question going to see a doctor or take medicine if you had cancer. So why are we questioning when people have any kind of mental health issue?
Yeah.
You do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so during those months, at the end of it, I found myself in a very gross place, because in taking care of my family and taking care of Ed, at the end of it, I was the heaviest I'd ever been. I was doing nothing that I could do to take care of myself. So at the end of December, jokingly, Ed and I took a picture of ourselves taking a walk, and I said, "Who wants to join the Ed and Susan Walking Club?" It was a joke. And now we have 1,500 people.
Oh, wow.
That wander with us. It's hilarious.
That's great.
We called it Wander On because of our names, and they pick the way what they want to wander, hike, bike, walk, whatever they want to do, run. And they literally are posting pictures of themselves every single day doing it.
That's good.
And it's proving to be better for our mental health. It's proving to be better for our physical health. And yeah, it's super fun. It's an amazing community of men and women. And we've got people that are walking 2,000 steps a day, and we've got people that are training for a Boston Marathon. So it's all the gamut, and they are above and beyond. Like, some started with like a goal of like 200 miles for the year, and they've already done 200 miles in January.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to watch what's happening in that. So, but the thing I want to say is the information about Ed and I with his road of depression, we are going to go way more in depth about that with She Speaks Stories. That community is so tender and dear. How do they hold stories so close? And we believe stories change lives. And Ed believes that in sharing his story, he is hopeful to break light on what depression is and how you can come out of it, and how God really is such a present help.
That's right.
So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, thank you for joining us on this episode of What's the Difference. I'm not just saying this because you're above me in the staff org chart. I really do mean it. You are a great leader. You are a picture of what it means to follow Jesus. In fact, I love the fact that literally you're bringing God's kingdom in your own family. Revelation 7:9. You're bringing that multi-ethnic nation right into your own home, and you're a picture of God's kingdom. And in fact, even right now, as we're recording this, our whole church has been challenged to memorize Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 through 6. You know it. I won't quiz you on it.
Yeah, thank you.
But I think you are a picture of that, where Paul says, look, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling that you've received, to be completely humble, to be patient and gentle, bearing with one another in love. You are a picture of that. And so thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
You're kind, Andrew. I appreciate you so much.
And thank you guys again for watching this 7th episode of What's the Difference. Don't miss the next episode. Next episode, we're going to have Lisa Harris on this episode.
I love her.
Susan, calm down. I'm doing the outro.
I just got a text from her this morning. She is fantastic. You need to make sure you tune into that. She's
right.
awesome.
Yeah, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because
Yeah.
Lisa leads a ministry called Transitions for You, where she actually helps people not who are living and battling homelessness, living in local motels. She helps them through counseling and financial training and through coaching, all led by the gospel, to step out of what they've been into and step into what God has for them. So make sure you don't miss the next episode of What's the Difference.
Thank you for tuning in to What's the Difference? Click on subscribe to make sure you get the next episode with Pastor Andrew. Connect with us for more resources and information on how you can make a difference at mtararat.org. See you at the Mount.